Enablement cannot be an event. It cannot be a 60-minute virtual session. It has to be an experience because that's ultimately how we learn. At the end of the day, a rep is going to listen to their manager or their peer over anybody on the enablement team. As much as possible, if you can get your champions, your frontline leaders to also be in the co-development of the program itself. I mean, the more they are invested in it, the more they want it to be successful too.
Just imagine you have a team of 4 managers, each run 10 reps. 1 or 2 sometimes pay attention, sometimes not. One is completely against it, and one is actually you got the buy-in from them. They are your early adopters. How should we navigate this situation? Hi, Nina. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you, Michael?
Can't complain. Sunny days. That's how I measure happiness these days, because I know we're back to Canada and things will get cold really soon. So
Yeah.
how have you
Well, we're
been?
having a little bit of a heat wave coming back. We had a nice little cool down, but it's coming back. So
All the best to you guys. So before we get started, I know we're going to talk about all things enablement and how to really tie our practices to revenue and something meaningful, and specifically focusing on ongoing training, frontline leadership. We get to all get that beautiful things. Before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, what are you working on these days?
yeah, sure. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Well, I've been in the enablement space for over a decade now, which is a little bit scary to say out loud, but really do love it. I tell people all the time, I can't imagine doing anything else. I started my career actually as an educator. I taught in high school classroom and then sort of fell my way into sales. I did sales for about 15 years, mostly in the technology and marketing space. And then at one point, I was working for ExactTarget as a seller, and Salesforce acquired ExactTarget. For those that are in the Indianapolis area, they'll know that story quite well. And this role of enablement was presented to me. And I was like, wait, what is this? Like, this sounds like the perfect thing for me. And indeed it was. And I've done all the things. I've built onboarding programs. I've run continuous learning certifications. I've rebuilt onboarding. I've been a team of one. So I've done all the things. Most recently, I was at Desar Voice, where I led a team of 7 to 8 practitioners, which was just a blessing. And I'm so grateful to have been able to lead that team through some tremendous growth at the company.
This is amazing. I love this journey because, again, it sounds like you just kind of got the best of both worlds right now. So from being an educator and getting to sales, and that's a long experience, 15 years in sales. So it's close to home, right? Like, I want to do sales, but maybe I missed what I used to do before. But then again, sales enablement is really a combination of both. It's just amazing. So how do you want to start this? Tell us about some of the challenges that you notice when it comes to, again, enablement overall. Said, hey, we are on the seats right now. We do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, people say, what did you do exactly? So I want to talk about that. Like, let's start with this.
Yeah. Well, I think every enablement practitioner probably struggles to some degree with the amount of asks that they have, how they deliver on those, how do they measure the results of those. I'm a big believer in making sure that we're driving impact for the business. At the end of the day, that is what we are there to do, is to drive impact. And so I think there's a lot of things in terms of what makes it challenging. Being able to prioritize, understand like what the true need is, really be able to diagnose using data, those kinds of things. And then once you decide what you are going to do, it's how do we build an effective program that gets the behaviors, the results that we're trying to drive, right? I always think about when we design programs is that we start with the metric that we're trying to drive, right? So are we trying to increase win rates or deal size or accelerate the time to close, things like that? And so starting with that metric, and then next is like the behavior. what is the behavior that we are trying to drive? And the way I always phrase that is, what are we trying to get reps to do or say that's different than it is today, right? And so if you can really articulate that well, then you've really defined what is the enablement meant to do. And then from there, you work backwards and you design the enablement to accomplish that goal. So what's the minimum amount of knowledge that they need to be able to perform that task? What coaching do they need? What reinforcement do they need? Are there any processes or things that we need to remove in terms of obstacles? All of those things come into play. So it's very comprehensive in looking at what the overall solution needs to be.
You know what's so interesting about this? When I think about, again, enablement and the struggles that we are, facing as enablement inside the organization. Yes, to your point, there are a lot of tasks, there are a lot of asks. Like, hey, let's roll out a methodology. Why should we even, you know, roll it out? And then on top of that, at the end of the day, we hear this right now everywhere. Enablement should be tied to, you know, revenue, directly, impact the revenue. I understand that. But you mentioned something interesting about behavior. So how to actually achieve that? You need that behavior change. And maybe it's hard to quantify. And before I was actually in this camp, like, yes, everything enablement should do should be tied to revenue. Yes, ultimately. But how about that behavior change, which is the hardest job ever? Because I'm selling it sales enablement solution. And I can see right now how difficult it is for companies to get adoption, to have this consistent actually behavior change, not a one-time thing while you do onboarding and said, hey, yeah, I'm going to get hired here. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do this every day. But how do we even build this culture that this thing that you're doing right now, you're going to keep improving upon? Who's actually doing that? So enablement, or because frontline managers are supposed to be reinforcing this. And based on my experience, it's not something that is happening often.
It is one of the biggest challenges for sure. I mean, like, we are all creatures of habit. We
Yep.
like our ways. And so especially when times are stressful or busy, we're gonna typically revert back to in whatever you know our historical behaviors
Yeah.
are, right? And so it takes a constant focus and a constant attention. But I think you're totally right in that it's a blend. It's on enablement to make sure that what they're getting is the right content at the right time, in the right way, with the right tools for managers. Like, that's on enablements. But the managers play a big part too. I mean, there's all kinds of studies about how your direct manager is the most important, relationship that you have in your work, and based on your happiness, your success, like all of these
Hmm.
things, right? And so we have to have the managers in the boat on this, right? We have to have managers who believe that this is the right thing they should be doing, that managers that are bringing it up on a regular basis, that are coaching and doing all of those things to continue to drive that. It has to be a drumbeat. Enablement cannot be an event. It cannot
Hmm.
be a 60-minute virtual session. It has
Hmm.
to be an experience, because that's ultimately how we learn. We learn over a long period of time with multiple repetitions and things that build upon each other, right? If you think of like the layered cake, right? You have to build the foundation and then you have to build on top of that and build on top of that again. So it's something that takes persistence and, a constant drumbeat of information, a constant drumbeat of coaching to actually make that stick. And that's whether it's, you're talking about using mutual action plans. That's an example that at my last company was something that we built some really good kind of manager reinforcement and coaching around to help drive that behavior. Because, at the end of the day, if people don't see the value in it, which again, that's partly on enablement to make sure that they do, but if they're not getting regular inspection and coaching, they're going to start to figure out that, oh, maybe this thing isn't so important, right? And
Hmm.
maybe I don't really have to do it. And so it's really important to have all of those things. And then, of course, the third stool is that the reps have a role in this too, right? So it's
Hmm.
enablement, it's managers, and it's the reps. And then all of that surrounded by kind of top level leadership supporting these initiatives.
That's so true. And, the way I look at it is this way. Again, if senior executives, senior leadership, they don't have this mindset about enablement. I don't know a way to change that. Yes, many on this shows go have a tough conversation and challenge that thought. Theory, sure, but in practice, it's really, really difficult to go back to the CR and say, "Hey, you're wrong," because you have no idea, what's going on, and you're just pushing for this methodology, and it's happening actually across the board. Like I go on calls with even VP level, and I'm like, "Hey, why do you even care about this tiny feature when we are looking at a bigger business problem?" This is because my CEO is obsessed with this, or my CRO said like this is the way to go. Changing that mindset requires not only to me courage, it's a crazy battle. Anyways, but we are talking about behavior change for reps. You're right. You need to partner up with managers. Imagine we are rolling out a new program. We are getting access to a new tool. Where should we really start? Not to slow down the process, but at the same time, not to screw up, like being so fast, giving access to everyone, let everybody goes nuts and get their hands dirty. How would you start? Like you start with managers, with reps, a few reps?
I think if time permits, I think anytime you can do sort of a pilot is going to give you the optimum outcome, right? Because you never know how something is going to roll out until you do
Hmm.
it, right? You
Yep.
don't always know, especially when you're talking about technology. You don't always know the hiccups or the kind of roadblocks that you're going to come up against. And so I think if you can to do a pilot makes a lot of sense because then you can get that feedback. You can also at the same time you're building champions, right? If you're
Hmm.
in it together and everybody understands that it is a pilot and it's not going to maybe be perfect, but you can start to build those internal champions because that's another thing. Like if you want something to have long-term sustainable success, you have to have those like peer-to-peer or manager to rep champions to help drive this forward, right? At the end of the day, a rep is going to listen to their manager or their peer over anybody on the enablement team. Even if you're talking about a VP
Hmm.
of enablement, that peer, that manager is going to have way more influence over what they do, what they don't do, right? So if you can do a pilot, get some early adopters, get some champions built, and then use that in a phased rollout, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we've seen that a couple of times in some technology rollouts that we've done. I will say, I think it's more feasible on the technology side. I think it's a little bit harder when you're talking about like a more of a skill development or, true like product enablement type thing, just because of how fast these companies are evolving and moving and their messaging is changing and the competitive market is changing. So I think you have to sort of balance like how fast do we need to deploy this? And, do we have the ability to do a pilot? I think when you're buying technology, when you're deploying new technology, you typically have a little bit of that one runway to be able to do a really effective pilot. So I would recommend that all the time.
So let's talk about some real use cases here. Just chat with people every day, all day. VP said, yes, let's do a pilot. Enablement is owning the initiative. Let's just, it's an enablement program. Then you see that frontline managers just simply they don't reinforce. First and foremost, who should give this bad news to the VP? Because they're not going to be on dashboards like checking stuff. And now the problem is already there. Like, how should we actually change that behavior to begin with? Because if nobody's actually using, let's say, a product or walking through a training, then it does not matter if it's perfect or not. So I want to talk about that. How would you go about fixing this issue early on when you see you don't get adoption from the leaders before even
Yeah.
fixing the rep problem?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously you've got the buy-in from the most senior level, and that's usually where these things come from. But again, they are not the ones that have the biggest influence on what
Hmm.
reps are actually doing or not doing. So I do think even if you have the most senior level, even if it's the CEO that says we are going to be doing this, right?
Hmm.
You really have to start to build champions at every
Hmm.
level, right? And so being able to build those champions to be able to help, again, just be that sound, be a sounding board for feedback, what's working, what's not working. Also help like just build that groundswell within their own peer group, I think is really important. And if you do that well, and you are consistently sharing back the data points, right? Like senior leaders care about data and what's actually happening. So if you're sharing that out regularly, I typically like to start, when I'm sharing out data, I typically like to start with the frontline leaders to say, hey, here's what's working well, here's what's not working well, here's where I need your help. And then I'll send that out a few times. And then if I'm not seeing the traction or the change where we need to see it, then I go up a level, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like you don't want to blindside anybody, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it's like, okay, well, I've shared this with you a few times and things aren't changing. So like, and you let them know up front, right? I'm going to share this with you weekly, at the end of the month, I'm going to share it, an additional level so they know that it's coming, but it's building that accountability from that, you know, frontline leader level. I think that's really important.
This is a great point. You want to have friends, you want to build a partnership, you're building together. It's not about reporting necessarily. No, but all of these things you're saying keeps, popping up some memories early on for certain clients. I still, struggle sometimes with adoption. It's a difficult thing and it has nothing sometimes to do with, what you're buying. It's like change management might be, necessary. But what if actually the CRO or VP or whoever is actually, signing this check and getting the vendor in, just not around to support this. I know this is a bad practice, but many of us like deal with this. Like you don't have that support from executive team. They said yes, they support, enablement, but when it comes to actually execution, just imagine you have a team of 4 managers, each, run 10 reps, one or two, sometimes pay attention, sometimes not. One is completely against it, and one is actually, you got the buy-in from them. They are your, early adopters. They're working. How should we navigate this situation? Like, what would you do? Like, you build a case with them, or you try to get, the rest of them engaged too? Because at the end of the day, just imagine it's a pilot for 2 months. That senior leader who's not engaged says, "Hey, it's your responsibility. Let me know how it goes at the end." How should we
Mhm.
deal with this situation? What's the smartest, move in this situation?
So I would say, and obviously I've seen this happen as well. So I don't think this is a unique challenge,
Yeah.
but I think, as I think about retrospectively where those situations sort of went wrong, I think it's about at the front of that conversation is having a very clear understanding of what you need that executive or sponsor to do, right? I think it's really easy for us to say, hey, will you sponsor this initiative? Or hey, will you be a champion? But like, what does that mean exactly? Like, and so to be very clear, like establishing, a RACI or whatever, like, model you use, but saying, here are the 3 things that I need you to do, right? I need you to, help amplify the message. So when I send out a communication, I need you to come over the top of it and talk about how important it is. Or conversely, like, I'm going to ghost write something for you and I need
Mhm.
you to send it because it's going to have way more credibility if you send it, right? The second thing I need you to do is I'm going to update you on these metrics, whatever, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever the case may be. I need you to put eyes on it and help me to drive the right behavior. So, like, just getting really crystal clear about what it is that you need, the role they need to play in this, right? And letting them know these are the things I'm going to do. This is what I'm responsible for, but
Mhm.
here's specifically where I need your help because this is what's going to make this successful. You're the one spending the money here, and I want this to be successful for you. So help me help you. And then if you can get really clear on that, because I've made the mistake of
Yeah.
saying, hey, will you be the sponsor?
Hmm.
being very vague in that, and then realizing I did not clearly communicate what I needed their help with. And
Hmm.
so I felt like I was constantly like pestering or being the nag when they didn't understand what I actually needed from
You know what I love about this? This is absolutely against order taking. So what you do is you set expectations, you show them, why you are proposing this solution based on the problem they're trying to solve. It's all about you. And this is the type of commitment I need from you to be able
them. Yeah.
even to deliver. And I think sometimes we make this mistake to jump the gun so fast because we get excited with something that a peer just introduced, or we think we have the solution, but it's beyond the solution. It's about how you strategically get alignment from the top.
They have to care about it as much, if not more, than you do.
Of
If
course,
you
yeah.
get to a point where you feel like your sponsor, your champion, doesn't care about this as much as you do, then we probably shouldn't be doing it, right?
Hmm.
Because, again, enablement never has that level of influence. I mean, we would love to, but we just don't, right? Because we don't directly manage these folks, right?
That's fair. I think a lot of us trying to change that narrative. I mean, Cornell talks about this a lot on LinkedIn, how to be strategic, how to, really own that seat and gain that respect that you deserve. Because at the end of the day, we're going to look at numbers. We're going to look at, what we've done for the organization to drive, that strategic seat. No, but I wanted to get your perspective. What actually worked for you in the past? And what didn't work and what you learned from it?
Yeah. Well, I think when you're talking about engaging, so one, like setting the right expectation. So that was a lesson. I had rolled out a leader development program, and I had a sponsor and a champion, and I didn't clearly communicate what I needed from them. And so like there was some tension there in terms of what we needed to happen. But I think when you do get that champion and you do have really clear expectations. So one example, we were working on a program with our client success organization, and we had a great champion. It was a frontline leader, and clearly articulated, these are the three things that I need you to help with. Like, I need you to send out, like, I'll craft the emails that we send out in terms of the updates, but I need those to come from you because you're going to have more influence, more authority, right? Giving them very clear indicators. And that program, we saw tremendous success, right? The adoption in that case was much greater because that manager was involved in the process. And I would say, as much as possible, if you can get your champions, your frontline leaders to also be in the co-development
Hmm.
of the program itself. I mean, the more they are invested in it, the more they want it to be successful too. So it's just a natural progression there. So if you can get them to help, whether it's creating content or even just reviewing content before it goes out, like, hey, this is got your name on it. So I want to make
Hmm.
sure that it's resonating with you. It'll resonate with your people, or co-developing that content. We had another program that we rolled out. It was like a career development program. So if you think about like an SDR or a BDR moving into like an SMB, and we had this very clear ask that we wanted to create a program to help those inside sellers get ready to move into an SMB role. And so not only did we have a really clear champion where we had defined what we needed them to do, like, we need you to show up to the kickoff call. We need you to show up to the final capstone project and be a participant in evaluating their success. We need you to, help us in terms of reviewing the content. So we had that clarity there. We also involved frontline leaders that would be inheriting those reps as they
Hmm.
got promoted. So they were very invested in the program to say, okay, we need you to help shepherd this program through, right? And then even to the point of content development, trying to get them to help with that review process. So they were involved at multiple steps throughout the process. And we saw out of that program, it was a very small program. We had, I think, 8 to 10 reps that were in that program, and it lasted about, I think, 4 months was the program. And because we had such good buy-in, reinforcement, coaching along the way, we saw, I think it was 70% of those who graduated the program got promoted within 6 months. So it was a huge success, but it was because they were involved in every moment throughout that program, right? And
This
again,
is
it
yeah.
wasn't an event. It was a sustained 4 month program. There was e-learning, there was live training, there was coaching opportunities, and we prepared those frontline leaders for what they needed to do. I think that's another really big part, is that a lot of times, I don't know if it's true everywhere, but it's been true at most of the organizations I've been at. Frontline leaders, they often have gotten promoted because they were really good at
Of
selling,
course.
right?
Yep.
And so if they haven't gotten proper training and development and coaching on what this new role looks like, on what it means to be a coach,
Hmm.
then they tend to, again, they revert back to old behaviors and
Yep.
they become super sellers instead of
Yep.
coaches, right? Where we need to really lean in and be those multipliers. So.
Can we break this use case, because this is really interesting and it seems like you guys really did a phenomenal job. 70% at least, success rate. It's amazing. So I want to ask a follow-up question, about this program. Let's just see how did you actually tie this to revenue impact? Can we break this down?
Well, I will say we probably didn't do the best job of actually tying it to
Mhm.
revenue explicitly.
Yep.
But I think working with the VP of the SMB organization and the leader of the inside sales organization, I mean, everybody knew that there was a value to this program
Yep.
because number one, it was going to help with retention within the inside sales team, right?
Hmm.
If they know that there's development opportunities and that they have an opportunity to grow and develop into an SMB seller, they are more likely to stick it out, right? Even if they've been in that
Yep.
role for 9 months or a year, if they know that there's a path forward, they're
Hmm.
going to, more likely stick it out, right? So there's a benefit there. Secondarily, our SMB sellers, with any new role, you're going to have some ramp up time.
Yep.
Well, if we can sort of prepare
Hmm.
those sellers before they step into that SMB role, like if you think about SDR, they don't really need to know how to account plan because they're just
Yep.
generating or
Hmm.
qualifying the leads that are coming in. If we start to teach them account planning and territory planning and what does it mean to actually like manage an opportunity in
Hmm.
Salesforce, we start teaching them those skills before they step into the role, well, they're going to ramp a whole lot faster,
Yep.
right? So we didn't do it in this case, but it would have been easy enough to kind of take data in terms of like what was the ramp time of a typical SMB seller when they moved
Yeah.
from inside sales into SMB, and then compare that to, those folks that went through the program.
Okay, let me ask you something. I love this. By the way, what you said makes a lot of sense. Like you're talking about career progression, keeping your talent, and it's just about the story uh, we tell about the narrative. Hey, you ramp them faster, time to market faster, time to first close faster. All that stuff are amazing. Let me ask you this: imagine if it actually didn't work out. Have you guys had any like contingency plans or any thoughts around if the program does not succeed, what would be, the worst case scenario in this case for enablement? Did you even, think about these things when you, run programs, or no, everything should be calculated?
No, we did. I mean, and that's why when we first sort of were designing this program,
Mhm.
because it was something like had never been done at the company. In fact, I'd never really done a career progression program in my career. And so this was a new thing. So there was definitely an opportunity that it may not work, right?
Yep.
In fact, one of the concerns that we
Yeah.
had was, okay, well, let's say everybody goes through the program, like there's still a risk at the end
Yeah.
that like there may not be a job for them to promote into, right? There's
Yeah.
no guarantee just because you go through the program that you're going to get promoted. So that could cause some like, not ideal circumstances for those that invested the time in the program and feel like maybe they, deserve to have that opportunity. But we knew that there was some risk in any new program.
Yeah.
And especially because we were trying to build this on a pretty accelerated timeline. And so I think what we did purposefully is we kept that group really small. If
Mm.
you are doing something for the first time and you don't know exactly how it's going to roll out, like let's not train the entire inside sales team, in this program. Let's pick a select group of folks so that we can test it out and iterate. And so what ended up happening, because we saw so much success in the first cohort, we very quickly, they wanted a second cohort. They're like, that was great. Let's do it again. We had to actually push back a little bit to say, well, okay, again, there's this risk that if we put people through a program and there's not a role to come to, that's going to cause some hurt feelings, right? And some ego and all the things
Potentially
that
some
come into
churn.
that, right? And so we managed to convince them to hold off for, I think it was 4 months before we ran the program again, because we wanted to make sure that there was at least a possible scenario where they would have some roles to pop into.
So to me, like giving this reality check and behavior change is value. It's
Mhm.
really difficult to communicate this value right now. So, hey, let's tie this to, yes, you can tell the story. Be all hard. That is just like a seller who's only talking about ROI. Let's calculate how much. Let's just dig in and see if this actually helped me solve that problem. We get there. But the fact that you give this reality check, of course, there could be negative implications, but that's value to me. Like, who's actually doing this? So
Yeah.
Enablement did it. It's hard to communicate. Maybe we need a better system to document all this, like, potential problems that we even avoid if we have a good set of enablement eyes in the room.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails? These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With SellMeThisPen AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at SellMeThisPen AI.
Let me ask you about this program, this is a specific program that you guys, ran again, because this is a good use case to dig in. Tell me about some of the challenges with champions you choose, because I'm sure it's never smooth. Not everybody's going to come and get it right away. So tell me about that if you can share.
I think you have to be really smart about who you choose as a champion, right? I mean, I think the tendency is like, I'm going to choose the top performers, right, to
Yeah.
be a champion because we know that they're doing
Mhm.
all the good things, right? And that can work really well. But then what happens is you tend to like keep leaning on the same people. And now those folks are helping with 3 or 4,
Yeah.
more initiatives, and they start to lose focus on what their actual job is, right? So you have to be really strategic about who you tap on the shoulder as a champion. In some cases, I wouldn't recommend probably going to someone who's like not performing well to be a
Yeah.
champion. But like a lot of times, if you go to sort of that middle player and tap them on the shoulder to be a champion, it does a couple of things. One, it's a great opportunity for them to show initiative, development, growth in their own career. So it's a feather in their cap or something to put on their resume for when they want to get promoted, right? It also, you know, teaching something or designing something helps you learn things better. So it can also have that sort of intrinsic benefit that if I I take someone who maybe isn't the best at territory planning, but is okay, and then I get them to help design the program, right? Or help facilitate or help coach around that topic, they're naturally going to lean in a little bit more. So it has this like win-win, right? You're getting a champion, but
Mm-hmm.
you're also like helping to upskill that person. So sometimes you want to think about it that way, especially if you can't tap that top performer because either they've got too
Yep.
many priorities on their plate or, you've asked them, sort of multiple times and, you don't want to burn your bridges.
And based on my experience, like sometimes again, you see high performing reps or managers, they just tend to care about something else, and that's fine. Maybe they don't want to get involved in learning and helping. Said, hey, I help by carrying numbers. I know it's a company culture, I understand that, but again, in practical sense, some people care about other things, and we shouldn't push them to get involved because we want to make our program successful or even company as a whole. With peer-to-peer learning, I know you're big on this. So you run this program, you had 10, let's say, reps getting through the program, training, working with both managers. Very smart, by the way. It's good, learning from myself too. So when you do this transition, get their own group manager and the next one. So this is amazing. Let's talk about peer-to-peer learning. So they get to this program. How did you design? Did you guys actually do any peer-to-peer sort of like practice or coaching or learning, sessions?
Yeah, so not only did we have frontline managers, we ended up, again, it was a group of 8 to 10 reps that were
Mm,
going through this, right? And so we had two SMB frontline leaders that were sort of the champions and helping
yep.
us kind of shepherd the program through. But then we also tapped a couple of high performing reps to
Mhm,
help us in the facilitation of sessions and content development. So
mhm,
it wasn't enablement presenting the programs. We were managing the program. We were building the content, but we were
yeah.
building it alongside them, right? And they were the ones actually facilitating.
What did they do exactly? Those high
They were
performing reps?
actually, so in those live training sessions,
Yeah.
they were the ones who were taking lead on actually presenting the content. So I
Mhm,
am a successful SMB seller. I am
mhm.
sharing my
I love it.
expertise as an SMB seller. Obviously, we co-developed that content with
Yeah.
them. So we wanted to make sure that it hit the standard of what the organization wanted them to do.
Mhm.
But it also had those nuances of, this is how this works in my patch, in my territory, right?
Can I ask one more question about this? Did they actually get hands on and do any practices or any sessions with those 10 reps? Or no, it's just a presentation. This is what I did to be successful in this role. This is what to expect. How did you actually do it? Did they practice with those reps too?
We had built two opportunities for them to kind of role play practice. We actually ran this program prior to us having some AI role play tools.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I probably would have used those. But we put them into groups and they had to do a mid program kind of project, right? And then
Mhm,
they had to do a capstone project. So there was two opportunities within the program where they had to do something. They had to create, I think the first one was a discovery role play. And then the second one was more of like them presenting, like, as they
mhm,
would to a customer. And so we kept that use case throughout the program. So, like, when we taught them about discovery skills, we used a very specific use case, right? And I think we even took, if I remember correctly, we took an actual client conversation and anonymized it. We're like, okay,
mm.
here's the customer, here's what they've said, in their first conversation. Let's role play what that would look like in that sort of broader, deeper discovery call. So they had an opportunity to practice. And that's where we brought in some additional like peer-to-peer kind of learning and practice.
Okay, I love this. I'm going to wrap this up because we have some rapid fire questions. But before doing that, look, this was a successful program. It was to you and the entire team. If you could change one thing about it, right now, if you could do it again, and you cannot cheat, we're not going to talk about the revenue impact. If you could change anything about this right now and do it again, what would that be?
I think for me, because we had tried to roll it out in a pretty accelerated time frame, we leaned on live training a bit too much. I think we should have had a better balance of asynchronous learning as well as kind of the live component.
Yeah.
My philosophy is always that if you are just sharing knowledge, sharing information, that most likely belongs in an e-learning. If you need to dialogue, practice, have discussion, that's where you leverage live training because you must have that human interaction. And so that's the way I always think about learning. But because we were building so quickly,
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks that maybe resist e-learning think, oh, enablement just wants to do that because it's easier. It's not. Building e-learning is actually harder than
And you need
building
the
learning.
knowledge anyways. Look, I'm selling
Yeah.
a platform for practice. So I have to say, no, I disagree. You need the knowledge. If you have no idea about who you're selling to, what you're selling, what's your value proposition, practice what exactly? So you need
Yeah.
that knowledge. I
Yeah.
completely
Oh, the
agree.
knowledge is necessary. I
Yeah.
think that, at least in my case, I feel like sometimes we get a little bit of pushback from sales leaders on they would prefer everything be delivered through live training versus
Oh,
e-learning. And I'm like, no, there's a reason that both exist and a reason for choosing one over the other.
mhm,
And in most programs, you're going to have elements of both, right? I mean,
mhm,
in an ideal situation, you're going to have kind of e-learning or asynchronous learning on the knowledge part.
yeah,
You might have a live training component on, a discussion or a role play or some type of active learning
yeah,
opportunity. And then maybe you have some additional practice through whether it's AI role play or some other practical application. And then you've got the coaching. So in an ideal situation, you're going to have that would be like the minimum.
mhm,
And then if you can do that repeatedly over and
yeah.
over, building upon each one, that's going to create the optimal learning experience and where the behaviors are actually going to stick, right? Again, the ultimate goal is that the behavior sticks. And then as a result, we see whatever the metric is that we're trying to drive.
I think we
I
need
think.
another session to talk about this continuous learning and reinforcement because this definitely, needs another session. Really appreciate you sharing this. This was great. So
Absolutely. My
if you're
pleasure.
ready, we're gonna go for our rapid fire questions really quick to wrap it up.
Okay.
All
I
right.
hope I'm ready.
Complete the sentences. Sales enablement leaders will be more effective if they only.
If they only work on the programs that drive impact and align to the business objectives of the organization.
Instead of sell me this pen, sell me this.
Sell me this reason to buy a fancy new AI tool, even though I don't know what problem I'm solving.
I love it. How your job actually, your role, your career impacted your personal development.
Oh gosh, every day, every day. The reason I love enablement, so there's two reasons I love enablement, maybe three. I love helping people develop. I am a lifelong learner and I get to learn so much by being an enablement practitioner because I get to interact with all different parts of the business and really dive deep where I want to dive deep. And then the third thing, which is kind of related, is that because enablement is the orchestrator of all, we get to work with marketing, product marketing, legal, deal desk, like all the departments.
And don't get bored.
I love being able to know every nook and cranny of the business. It's just so fun.
I love it. All right, last question. Our next guest is Rob Letzer. He's a senior director of sales and business development at Clio and a good friend. Actually, I worked with him at Hopin in the past. Do you have any questions for him?
I love this part of your podcast. I was wondering what my question would be. So I would say, how are you enabling and supporting the frontline leaders to be those multipliers of success?
I love that. All right. I think that's pretty much it for today. I appreciate you joining. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a great example that, we kind of like dig in a little bit more. We could talk about it for hours for sure. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I guess until next time, bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.